Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of All Things Neurodivergence. Today we're going to be talking about people pleasing through a neurodivergent lens. Sorry, um, again, people pleasing through a neurodivergent lens. So, why is people pleasing so common in neurodivergence? That is a good question. There's a few reasons, and I'm going to get to them in just a second. Sorry, my apologies. There we go. Just trying to put some notes in front of me so I'm not always constantly looking up. Why people pleasing is common in neurodivergence? Well, one, it's a lifelong pattern of feeling different, which leads to seeking approval to fit in. So, when you're told that you're too much, that you're too intense, when you don't understand social cues, you tend to rely on other people to help you to fill in the blanks. So, you want to kind of know what's going on, right? So you're trying to fit in. That also kind of leads to the chronic fear of rejection. So RSD, which we've talked about before. And because you're so worried about what people think and you're so scared that you're going to be rejected, sometimes before you even actually have any proof that it's going to happen, we tend to over accommodate. We tend to say yes, even when we don't necessarily want to or feel that we should, but we do it from a place of fear. Masking becomes a default survival strategy. we, especially when we don't know that we're neurodivergent, masking just becomes a part of who we are. We don't realize that we're masking. We just know that I don't fit in and I want to, because when I do or say things that aren't accepted by my peers, it doesn't feel good. And so we try and kind of fit in. And everybody does that to a degree, but neurodivergents do it to a much higher degree. Growing up misunderstood increases the dependency on external validation. So when you've been told kind of your whole life that you're too much, too intense, too this, too silly, or you're too quiet, or whatever it may be. When you misunderstand social cues, when you don't understand what people are talking about, or it takes time for you to integrate what is being said, and you don't pick things up quite fast enough, or you do, but because your brain is kind of going so quickly, you just kind of move really, really fast, which can also lead to misunderstandings. And so you tend to rely on people around you to tell you what is right and what is wrong, instead of relying on yourself, because you've kind of learned, whether rightly or wrongly, that being yourself isn't okay. And so you then rely on the people around you to explain what is right, what is okay. And another one is that social rules often feel very unclear. And especially if you're autistic and you don't really understand social cues, or you kind of have to really look and examine and study and research kind of social rules, because they aren't clear. There is no kind of hard and fast rules of like, well, do this, then this. It's very murky. It's context dependent. Um, and so often people pleasing becomes the safest script. It becomes the safest thing to do, because you're like, well, if I just do what other people want me to do, then I'm not going to make a social faux pas. So, what are some neurological and emotional factors? Well, one, RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, that we just talked about. The perceived disapproval feels physically painful. Whether it is actually there or not, just the perception of it can be so overwhelming, can be so painful, that we'll do anything to not have to experience it. Emotional hyperarousal. So big feelings plus difficulty regulating those big feelings can be really, really hard, right? So if we kind of toe the party line, so to speak, it makes it a little bit easier to, even though we're maybe experiencing the big feelings, um, and kind of like learning how to regulate conflict or kind of navigate conflict, it can be helpful to have that script to follow. So even though I'm having the big feelings, I don't necessarily have to act on them or show them because that wouldn't be kind of socially acceptable. Low interoception, so difficulty knowing what you want or need in the moment. So it kind of goes back to relying on others, right? So if I'm people pleasing, um, then I don't have to think about myself and my needs because I'm focused on you and what you need. Executive dysfunction, executive dysfunction often requires um, learning how to set boundaries and say no and follow through. When you have executive dysfunction, that's so much harder. Somebody just tells you what to do and I can follow it. That's easy in the short term. It creates problems. It can often create problems in the long term, but in the short term, it often is easier to just be a follower, to just do what somebody tells you to do. Sensory overwhelm. Conflict or disagreement can be overstimulating, so you avoid it at all costs. Or alternatively, it can be so stimulating um, that yeah, maybe it gives you some dopamine, but then the crash afterwards, right? Speaking of dopamine dependence, so praise feels like a reward, and disapproval often feels like a withdrawal. And one of the things that a lot of people don't really know or understand about neurodivergence, especially ADHD, and I'm not sure if this applies to autism, although I have to do some research into that. But one of the things is that our brains, our ADHD brains, don't actually respond to criticism. So if you want us to do something, if you praise us, if you like say, hey, you did really well, that triggers the dopamine response in our brain. And so that feels really good. And so when we do what people want us to do, we get that dopamine response from it. And so this can be weaponized. It can be hard to kind of go it on your own because you're having to kind of like do it without the reassurance, without the reinforcement. So, what are some people pleasing behaviors you might see? Well, saying yes before checking your capacity, right? There's a few reasons. One could be um, you just want to please the person, but it also might be that you're genuinely excited, whether it's something you want to work on or you enjoy the person and you enjoy working with them. Um, but you say yes before you realize that, like, well, this doesn't fit within my capacity. So another one would be taking on more work responsibilities or emotional or mental labor than others, or taking it from them. Hey, can you do this for me? I'd really appreciate it. Sure, I have my own work, and I don't understand why you're not doing yours, but I don't want to have you upset with me. So yeah, I'll do it. Apologizing excessively. I mean, granted, I'm Canadian, and if you're Canadian, you see this. That's kind of part of the social contract. But um, I think that neurodivergent people kind of apologize even more excessively than Canadians, right? So if you're Canadian and neurodivergent, you're a super apologizer. Um, Changing your personality depending on who you're with, and that kind of goes back to masking. The sense of you don't know who you are, and even if you do know who you are, you feel that who you are isn't enough or isn't wanted or is tolerated. So if I can be like somebody else, or be kind of what they want, then I'll be accepted, right? Which is it's not great. um, and it can be hard. I know for myself when I have kind of I'm in different groups of friends growing up, and then when they would come together, it'd be like, well, who am I? Because I'm a different person depending on who I'm around. And yes, everybody does this to an extent, but I was very, so I think that's something to kind of take into consideration. Um, Avoiding expressing preferences. It's fine, whatever you want. I don't care. And yeah, sometimes it is genuine, like I really, really don't care. A lot of times it's not. And again, it's because I'm worried that, I'm choosing something or I'm stating a preference that is socially not acceptable or is there's a stigma to it. Or I just don't want to upset somebody else. It's like I would, well, we'll do what you want. It's fine. Um, Suppressing your reactions to keep the peace. This is a huge one. Especially kind of with those big emotions that we talked about, right? With neurodivergence, we tend to get overstimulated easily. We tend to have, emotional dysregulation. We tend to have kind of big reactions. So that can be really hard too. And so, sometimes it's about understanding that, I can be myself and that's okay. But alternatively, sometimes it's not only suppressing your reactions, but it's giving a reaction or performing an emotional reaction. For myself, when it's late at night and I'm tired, my affect goes very flat, very flat. So when I'm talking with people, it can come off as I'm angry or disinterested. I'm not. Um, so sometimes to put people at ease, I will become more emotive, more expressive. And that's not my natural state, even kind of in my everyday life. It's what I do during the day because it's what I've kind of been taught to do my entire life. And there are some elements of it, but a lot of times, my affect is, just kind of flat. But I don't do that for fear of how others would perceive me, of how it would affect them. And so, that's the piece. Over explaining to avoid someone being upset with you. Over explaining is such a neurodivergent trait. I mean, yeah, again, do you have to be neurodivergent to over explain? No. But a lot of times, over explaining when you're neurodivergent comes from a place of fear. It's, I don't want to be misunderstood because I so often am. And so I feel if I can explain it, if I can find just the right words to explain this, then you won't be upset with me or you won't misunderstand me, which will not happen. It's just that's not on us to do other people. That's why we ask clarifying questions. That's why, it's important for communication to be two-way. So here's why it's not just being nice. It's a self-protective nervous system response, not a personality flaw. We're not doing this because, oh, we just want people to feel good. I mean, yeah, obviously, if you're a nice person, you're a good person, you want people around you to feel good. But when you're doing it from a place of fear rather than a place of um, community or connection, um, that's not great. If I genuinely don't care where we go or what we do, I am fine saying that. But it's also okay to, if I do have a preference, to speak up and say it. Now, am I always going to get my way? No, and that's okay. But I'm allowed to have thoughts and opinions. I'm not going to be palatable for everyone, and that's okay. I don't have to be. But that was a really hard thing for me to learn. And it's still something that I kind of push back on in myself because I find it coming up. It's often rooted in past experiences of being criticized, misunderstood, or invalidated. These are learned responses. These are not intrinsic to who we are. Again, being a nice person, being a good person, yeah, being mindful, considerate of others, good things. But it's why are you doing this? And if you don't do it, what is the thought of like, well, what's going to happen, right? Thing is, it's a form of fawning. One of the four trauma responses. So fight, freeze, flight, and fawn. No, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Right. So if I'm being mugged, it's like I can fight them off. I can run away. I can just freeze, not do anything, or I'd be like, "Here's my wallet. Don't hurt me." Right? And the thing is, the goal isn't always approval. Sometimes it's safety, predictability, or avoiding overwhelm. Right? It's important to understand why you kind of are engaging in this specific people pleasing behavior because there can be many reasons why you're doing it, and it changes depending on the context, depending on the people, the environment, all those things. right? So, how does it impact your daily life? Well, one is chronic burnout from doing too much for others. When you take on the work that other people are supposed to be doing, or that you don't have space for, you burn out. You often have difficulty trusting your instincts or preferences. You're so used to putting other people first to putting yourself on the back burner, if you're even on the stove at all. Um, you have trouble, trusting when you're like, yeah, I don't care, that you actually don't. You're actually okay with them doing it, right? Um, this often kind of creates resentment, but we're often unable to communicate it. I've had friends where, I'm the person that always reaches out, always reaches out, always reaches out, and this has been my entire life, and I got really, really resentful about it. I didn't speak up because I was afraid of losing those friends. But what I had to realize was, were they really my friends if I spoke up about this and they continued to behave the way that they did, or that they got upset with me, or that they dismissed it or invalidated it? And that was something that I had to learn, to be able to speak up for myself. And I did. And yeah, I did lose some friends over it, and that sucked. But in that case, were they even actually my friends? Right. Another one is identity confusion. Who am I without pleasing? Who am I without allowing others to do what they want? Right. Who am I without others? We often attract relationships, like I was just talking about, where we're taken advantage of. And that can be really hard to see. And again, when you do speak up for yourself, sometimes those relationships will disappear, or they'll gaslight you, or guilt you. And is that a possibility? Yeah. But then you have to kind of think, is this the kind of relationship that I want? Right? And emotional exhaustion from just constant self-monitoring and masking. Masking is exhausting. Not being your true authentic self is exhausting. And it's not always safe to be your true and authentic self. And that sucks, that is true. But I feel like there's a difference when you're doing it consciously and intentionally for a purpose, versus doing it just because it's kind of an ingrained habit, or an ingrained kind of like skill that you've learned, and you do it without realizing that you're doing it. Right? So, why is setting boundaries so hard for neurodivergent brains? Well, some of the reasons that we are already talked about: fear of conflict or confrontation, right, can be very emotionally and centrally overwhelming. um, difficult, sorry, difficulty gauging how much energy you'll have for later. That could be, it's like, well, if I do this now, will I be able to do something later? Or if I do this now, and then it's like, oh, I'm so drained later. Trouble recognizing your limits until you're already in burnout. That is a huge one that so many of us do, especially if you're an entrepreneur. That one is because we're always on. We're constantly trying to promote and and build the business, and that's a hard place to be. And a lot of neurodivergent folks are entrepreneurs. So I think that's something else that I will talk about is neurodivergence and entrepreneurship, because it's a big correlation there. Um, Struggling with prioritizing your needs, or my needs, when others feel urgent. Again, it's that you've learned to put others first, because my needs don't matter. It's not important. It's you. It's what you need. Right? And it's not true. You can prioritize your needs while recognizing that you don't have to neglect other people's needs. How do you find that harmony? How do you find that resolution in there? And our past experiences of being punished for needing something different, when we have spoken up and expressed a need, or a boundary, or an accommodation, and had it be dismissed or invalidated or ignored. So it kind of taught us, it's just like, you know what, there's no point asking. It's not going to be respected. And that's a really shitty way to think, but it's a really shitty thing to experience. So what are some skills and strategies that can help? Well, one that I really like is practicing pausing. So, you know, basically buying time before responding. So let me get back to you, or let me check my calendar, or my favorite, let me check in with the wife. And I'm not checking with the wife because, she requires it and I'm whipped. It's because we have a life together and there may be things that she has planned that I'm not aware of because they've come up and she just had an opportunity to tell me. Um, it may be that something that involves us and I just want to run it by her before I just unilaterally decide that she's going to do this or that she's going to have to take care of, the kid or the house or whatever while I go off and do my thing. Right. So it's just common respect. Body awareness check-ins. So noticing tension, overwhelm, or shutdown signs. This is really hard with interoception. So, it's really trying to get back in touch with your body and what that means and what that looks like. That's something all of these are things that you can explore on your own or with a therapist. Um, Trying to kind of develop micro boundaries. So small, manageable limits. So shorter hangouts, flexible plans, letting people know that you may not be able to be as predictable or reliable as they would like you to be. Um, Within reason, of course, and understanding that if you do that, that may alter how they respond or interact with you because they also have a right to um, expect predictability or consistency from people in their lives if that is what they need. But again, it comes from communication and talking about it. I had a friend when we kind of first started hanging out that was like, I don't reach out to people. She's like, I completely forget all the time. And I'm just really bad at it. I do this with everybody. So she's like, if you want to be my friend, just know that you're going to have to be the one that initiates. Um, and when I was talking before about how feeling like, oh, I'm always the one that kind of has to reach out, I never felt that with her because she was very, very clear right from the beginning. This is who I am. And if I wanted to be her friend, and then I would kind of need to be the one that reaches out. And when I do, we have great conversations. We hang out. It's fantastic. She came like 3 hours away when I had my master's celebration, graduate master's. When I had my master's graduation celebration that my wife put on for me, she came from 3 hours away. Right, so she is a good friend. I have to be able to reach out to her, but she told me that in the start. Right, so communication. Neurodivergent friendly scripts. Uh, I want to help, but I don't have the bandwidth today. Let me see how my energy is before I commit. That doesn't work for me, but here's what I can do. A lot of these really come down to communication. Self-validation, honestly, reminding yourself that your needs are legitimate, that, we have different energy needs, more fluctuating energy needs than neurotypical people. That just because you have the capability does not mean you have the capacity. And that is something else that I should probably um, talk about a little bit more is capability versus capacity. Um, Reduce masking where safe. So practicing small moments of authenticity or kind of designing a neurodivergent friendly life or environment as best you can where it is safe to do so, because it's not always safe. As I said, sometimes it's not. It sucks that that's the case, but we have to be realistic. Um, and we're able to regulate before responding. So, deep pressure, movement, grounding, fidgets, things like that. Um, so, let's reframe people pleasing. It's not a failure. It is a well practiced survival strategy. Is it a great one? No. But sometimes it has served you well, which is why you've kind of kept coming back to it. Does it, you know, help you in the long term? Not usually, but in the short term, it can be very beneficial. You learn to read people because you had to, not because you're weak or not because you wanted to. It was a survival mechanism. It was a way to try and connect before, and for a lot of us, often before we realized that there was anything different about us. Boundaries aren't a rejection of others; they're protection for you. So instead of thinking like, "Oh, I'm saying no to you," I'm saying yes to me. And here's the thing: it's not an either or. It's not a zero sum game where if I say no to you, then if I say yes to me, I have to say no to you. It's I can say I'm not able to do this right now, but maybe later I can, or I can't do all of this, but maybe I can do some of this. Right? Real relationships don't require you to shrink to be loved. Let me say that again. Real relationships don't require you to shrink to be loved. We can have a conversation, we can have debates, we can have disagreements, we can have conflict, but it doesn't mean that you have to change who you are. Yes, there's a difference between changing little things to help somebody else to feel better or to, to engage with you, but you don't have to change your personality to hang out with somebody. And if you do, then maybe they're not the person to hang out with. Maybe you need to find people that like you for you and who you are. So, thank you for coming. I appreciate you coming by. And if you want to leave any comments, I'd be happy to respond. If you're looking for counseling in the London area in person, we would love to see you, and as well as virtually in Ontario. And our website is www.embodiedresilience.ca, and we are on most of the socials. And so please feel free to reach out. And thank you for coming, and hope to see you at the next one. Thanks.